So right now you can definitely see a difference side by side. So we've got the PolarPro, it's on the A1, they are on different cameras, and on the A7S III, we've got the B+W. They are both set to 2 stops. We're running at an ISO 1600, very similar, same color temperature, as close about as we can get. So basically what you're seeing right now is just more how they're gonna look out of the camera. What I want you guys to decide is, does the mist look good to you? Like, these lights are cheesy, yeah. You got the lights behind me, you got the lights on my sides. Look how they kind of affect the image. Look how they kind of just are softer, I guess, is the best way to put it, on the diffusion or the mist filter here. Obviously, that's gonna carry over into photos as well. Right now, we're headed over to one of my favorite spots so we can get some photo examples. We'll do 2 long exposures, and I think we'll see something very interesting out of both of these filters. All right, Future Kyle here, and I want to talk to you guys about the polarization we're seeing on this, because it's really bad, surprisingly, on the PolarPro. Let's first look at the B+W. So to their discredit, right, you can see in the edges we're at 16 millimeters. You can definitely see the vignetting, and it's actually part of the filter itself. When we switch over to the PolarPro, you'll notice when you look in the water and when you look in the top right here at the sky, there's definitely cross polarization going on. Now we're at a 6-second shutter speed, so it's a very long exposure. That's really gonna accentuate any of this. But I mean, the way these basically work, right, as you're twisting them, it's using different glass to make it darker. So while you're gonna see that on definitely lower end glasses when you're spending 250 bucks on a filter, usually it's gonna minimize that, especially when you have things that are limited, right? It's 2 to 5 stops. When you go like a 1 to 9 stop or you get a little more extreme, this can become a little more common. When you have something like a 2 to 5 stop, at $250, it's a little disappointing that I'm seeing this much polarization going on. As you can definitely see, these are gonna do a lot in terms of kind of spreading light around, so to speak. What was really interesting to me when I got these is the 6 to 9 stop and the 2 to 5 stop are clearly different manufacturers, like completely different metals when you look at these two. Even the case, right? Look at the cases, like different as well. And that has me worried because these have been on back order for a while. And so this is gonna be the 6 to 9. Let's unscrew it. And you hear kind of how smooth that is now. Yeah, much different noise. The actual rubber case is like hard rubber, if that makes sense, versus a nice soft grippy rubber. It's very, very difficult to remove. You almost have to fingernail it and pry it off. And when you look at the filters themselves, like this one is a matte color, this is the shiny gold. Okay, so maybe the 2 to 5 stop to 6 to 9 stop is different. This is another 6 to 9 stop, but I had the 77 non-mist edition, and it matches this one perfectly. Like how the metal is attached on the case itself, how this screws in, the filters on here, everything is very consistent with these two. And the 2 to 5 stop is what's been sold out. And so I'm just worried, are they using a cheaper manufacturer? All right, so let's give them the benefit of the doubt and just assume that they're very similar quality, even though they're using different metals. It doesn't sound as nice. The plastics look a little bit cheaper. The glass is really what's gonna matter, right? They're filters. Where that got interesting is they have a different amount of mist particles, whatever you want to call that, inside of the filters. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to convey this on camera. If I can, I will. But on the 6 to 9, it's very dispersed. Now, interestingly, like there's almost even chunks where there's a bunch in one spot, but there's very few ultimately. And that's really what drew me to the PolarPro filters, is the fact that it's kind of this, you know, extra layer, but it doesn't take away from any of the image quality or sharpness. When you look at the 2 to 5, it's just packed with them. And if you saw in this intro, right, like the whole screen kind of turns blue hued when you turn the light on, which is interesting because it's supposed to be subtle. I do like the image overall, but I'm just wondering, why are they using different amounts? That means the glass is different. Are they gonna have different color cast? It's just, it's not something you wanna worry about when you're spending 200, 250 bucks on these filters. So whether you want the mist or non-mist, let's just kind of compare these two. I have the B+W. This is going to be actually even more expensive than the PolarPros. This is about 280 bucks. The things I like and dislike about them, it's tough to say with this newer manufacturer, but in general, right, the ergonomics, the case, everything's very nice on the PolarPros. Like, it's clear they put a lot of thought into how they built these. Having the Defender is great. It's going to protect it on top of everything else. The actual quality themselves, as you twist them, it sounds good. The action is smooth. B&W's 1 to 5 stops. Now for me with video, that's huge. A lot of people complain it does not have the haptic feedback. I'm kind of okay with that, right? I'm looking at the screen, I'm looking at my exposure, and that's what I'm gauging it off anyway. I'm not doing math. I do have constant shutter speeds, but I'm not basically saying, okay, this is 1 stop, here's 2 stops, this lens is on a 1.2. Like, I'm just looking, is it overexposed? Do I see any type of peaking going on? If I do, then I turn it a little bit darker, right? Like, it's pretty common sense here, especially with the flip out screens on the A7S III. So to that end, I definitely like having 1 stop on here because I can leave it on my camera more frequently versus 2 stops here, and you're not getting polarization. That's one of the big problems a lot of times when you start to switch to these is that, okay, the more stops you add, the more polarization it's gonna introduce. If we zoom in a little bit, are we losing some form of sharpness with that amount? Probably a little bit. I think they claim like you're not gonna lose any sharpness. It's pretty clear you're gonna lose a little bit. So that's gonna happen, but there is a nice image to it. I think for me in the studio here, I definitely am inclined to use it. Out and about, I'm probably gonna stick with the B&W because you get the 1 to 5 stops. It's a more natural, so to speak, image. But I think for photos, for things where I want it to be a little bit more artistic or maybe rounded off, like in here, there's not a ton going on. And then you have a few of these lights. So the softer they are, great. And so here's the thing, ultimately, like these are 2 distinct filters. The B&W is clearly, in my opinion, better at just darkening the scene, whether that's to get the shutter speed you're gonna need or whether that's to do something like a long exposure. The polarization, the mist filter, the bending of light, the smoothing of the scene, there's definitely more of an artistic touch when you do something like the PolarPro, which we have on right now. So it really comes down to kind of your personal preference. Are you looking for something more artistic, or are you just looking to kind of darken for shutter speeds or long exposures? Not necessarily I could go with either. They're around the same price point. Like, they do have distinct advantages. So let me know what you guys think. Do you have a strong preference of one or the other? I actually really like the 1 to 5 stop advantage of the B&W. But the PolarPro, that smoothness is really nice in things like the studio. So again, they're both great. Hit that thumbs up if you guys like this video. Ask any questions in the comments below. I will see you guys next time. As always, it has been a pleasure.